And now for some ethics. Let me begin by presenting the main standard ethical considerations in the consortium's projected research on BaBots. Question: will they be harmed? Answer: no. Question: will they escape or be released and harm others? Answer: no. Verdict: no ethical issues detected. Case closed. That was an analysis of sorts of the usual suspects, what happens on the beaten path. But wait, there is more. Let me explain why in terms of the remit of the Aalto Group. We are not the consortium's institutional watchdog. The lawyers and ethics committees in the partner universities cover that aspect. We are a sui generis element of the consortium. We have our own ethical and philosophical agenda to pursue. Doing that with the other partners' help will offer the consortium insights concerning off the beaten path ethical issues. Beyond that, it will provide new research-based knowledge of some under-investigated premises of current research ethics. Before going on to the things that we intend to do, a few words about our qualifications for the job are in order. 20 years ago, I published in the Journal of Medical Ethics this little diagram. It explicates how ethics committees could approach research on entities that are autonomous, self-aware, or sentient. Nothing new there. Ask for their permission if they are capable of giving it, do not kill them if they may appreciate their existence, and avoid causing pain and anguish. For our BaBots research, promoting the well-being of human and non-human animals is, perhaps indirectly but still, the motivating background factor. In addition to producing knowledge about our modified C. elegans, there is a promise of future uses, at least in improving the human lot. Since C. elegans cannot be asked for their consent, and since they presumably have no conception of themselves as subjects, the only stumbling block could be sentience. Can pain or something similar be inflicted on them? The standard answer has been no, so clear sailing maybe, except that I shall return to this in due course. But first, some more of our qualifications. In the same year that the diagram was published, Tuija and I began to toy with the idea of negative utilitarianism. We had just published an article on genetic engineering and the risk of harm, and something in our analysis prompted us to think further. If people should not inflict or allow unnecessary suffering, then why not just get rid of humankind and perhaps all other sentient species as well? We did recognize that there would be practical as well as ideological obstacles to be overcome in this scenario, but the idea lived on. Since I'm in the habit of returning to my old research themes like a dog returns to its vomit, I have in fact just recently completed this task, and the result is forthcoming from the Cambridge University Press. But that for our BaBots project is neither here nor there. Our next port of call was precaution. It was all the rage at the turn of the millennium. It was applied originally to environmental matters, but then increasingly also to biomedicine. The precautionary principle states that if something can be really dangerous, we should not do it. It doesn't matter if we don't know the exact mechanism. The burden of proof is with those who want to do something potentially dangerous. This developed into two directions. Tuija pointed out that while the precautionary principle may be excessively limiting, there is also an opposite force at play. Many bioscientists seem to rely on what she called the hopeful principle. If something could be extremely useful, it should be done, although we have no exact knowledge of the mechanism. Who knows, it might lead to curing lethal diseases. I concentrated on another route and combined precaution with the associated ideas of dignity and solidarity. My 1998 journal Medical Ethics model was in line with the American 4 principles of bioethics: doing good, not inflicting harm, respecting autonomy, and observing justice. These had been criticized for being a cover for a consumerist model in medical ethics. Critics said that people should be treated with dignity, solidarity, and precaution. This would have no bearing on our work on BaBots. They are not people, except that our further work took us to unexpected directions and blurred the distinction. Involvement with so-called integrative bioethics forced us to think about the value of life, all life, and about our proper attitude towards it. Should all organisms be respected, as suggested by Albert Schweitzer and before him the German theologian Fritz Jahr? And if so, what would that mean? Should we not kill bacteria even if they threaten to kill us? And it doesn't stop at spontaneously formed carbon-based life. An organism or a quasi-organism can be partly or entirely synthetic and still count, especially if it's sentient. If we abide by the rule of do not inflict unnecessary suffering, we should probably not experiment on such entities or try to create them. So, those are our main credentials for participating in the BaBots project. No knowledge of the science, but 2 heads full of feverish ideas about philosophy and ethics ready to be applied to a new context. Let's draw an outline, what we might investigate and how you could help. Our work could start by learning more about these things: the sentience or not of C. elegans, the nature and implications of sentience more generally, the appropriate response to sentience, whether it be actual, potential, or emerging, and the roles of precaution and reverence for life in dealing with it. At the same time, we could prompt you to double-check the possibilities and hazards of deliberate and accidental release of the modified C. elegans populations that the consortium studies. Are the safety arrangements waterproof? Once again, the question of precaution might become relevant. With this agenda, we could cover both the internal, are they hurt, and the external, are they dangerous, aspects of research ethics as they apply to our project. So, on with it then. How to prove that C. elegans are not sentient? Sentience is not always well defined in philosophical discussions on, for instance, negative utilitarianism. The rough yardstick is simply, if it says ouch, don't do it. But that's not helpful in our context. BaBots don't say anything, but the inability to express oneself is not a good reaction. Jeremy Bentham, the iconic 18th century utilitarian, had this to say about the treatment of non-human animals. The question is not can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? The situation calls for indirect as well as direct ouch evidence for sentience in non-humans. A recent analysis by Crump and others has it that at least these criteria for sentience could be used in animal studies: nociception, sensory integration, integrated nociception, analgesia, motivational trade-offs, flexible self-protection, associative learning, and analgesia preference. The author's main topic is sentience in decapod crustaceans, obviously a more complex life form, but C. elegans also get a comparative treatment, as Elizabeth Irvine summarizes commenting on Crump and others. The nematode C. elegans satisfies 3 criteria: nociception, analgesia, and analgesia preference. This shows substantial evidence of sentience. However, as Crump and others recommend, considering the broader evidential picture and recognizing that not all criteria are equal, it turns out that the roundworm C. elegans probably isn't sentient after all. It fails to meet many other criteria, including the presumably central criterion, sensory integration. Which seems to bring us to the traditional notion that non-humans without complex nervous systems don't need any special protections. The message is fortified by Chalukya and others who argue that although C. elegans fulfills Crump and others' criterion 5, this is insufficient evidence of any subjective experience that could be called sentient. In their words, we started with the premise that these worms were sentient and then sought to understand the neurons that were both necessary and sufficient for a motivational trade-off involving the rewarding experience of food and the negative experience of an aversive odor. A simple hierarchical network consisting of 2 chemosensory neurons and 3 interneurons was found to produce an output to motor neurons that enabled worms to respond in a contextually appropriate manner to an aversive odor according to the worm's hunger state. Given that this circuitry is like that found in the human spinal cord, retina and primary visual cortex, 3 regions which are neither necessary nor sufficient for subjective experience, we conclude that motivational trade-offs are not a criterion for subjective experience in worms. These studies give some answers to our first 2 questions, what sentience could be and whether or not C. elegans needs sentience-based protection. Close but no cigar, according to these scientists. Then how to argue that C. elegans might still be in need of protection. We have no expertise or urge to argue against findings like Crump and others and Chalukya and others. They have demonstrated that sentience can be operationalized quite sensibly and in a way that exonerates C. elegans researchers of any substantial animal protection violations. Good for you, good for us. But philosophers can always go the extra mile and make a mountain out of a molehill. If someone wanted to set limits to work on C. elegans, how could they go about doing it? There are 2 options here, a concrete common sense approach and a symbolic philosophical approach. The concrete first. If I have understood correctly, our aim is to modify C. elegans to make them better at performing simple tasks. I'm gathering, and correct me if I'm wrong, that at the later stages success will require the use of motivational trade-offs like food and aversive odors. The unmodified, untrained C. elegans will be turned into modified, trained BaBots by some mix of gene technology, frustrations, and conditioned satisfactions. I'm trying to avoid any anthropomorphism here, but the design doesn't sound entirely kosher, so to speak. Going out there and exposing reactive organisms to manipulation and extra hardship in the service of humans could jar some negative utilitarian vegan sensibilities. The picture is easy to draw and you can see it here. The miserable modified slave C. elegans being ushered by a stench to food through a burning loop by evil BaBots scientists. This doesn't have to be accurate. The idea of modification alone would probably be sufficient. Don't fret though. I'll introduce the idea of possible interspecies trade-offs at some point. That might save the day. But first the other option. The symbolic approach takes the concrete line a step further. We are not only exposing reactive organisms to extra hardship in the service of humans, but we are also doing it with no regard of their interests and ends. The following may sound like a stretch, but let us give it a go. In his famous humanity principle, Immanuel Kant made this demand. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never merely as a means but always at the same time as an end. Integrative bioethicists have suggested that the principle should be extended to all life. Act in such a way that you treat life, whether in yourself or in any other life form, never merely as a means but always at the same time as an end. If embracing plant and microbe life seems to be taking it a step too far, we could, in the case of C. elegans, limit the requirement to animals. Act in such a way that you treat animality, whether in yourself or in any other animal, never merely as a means, but always at the same time as an end. All this, of course, has to be taken with a healthy pinch of salt. The principles are simple enough, but their application, if you will excuse the pun, is another can of worms altogether. How do we treat humanity, life or animality at the same time always as an end? The answer might be within our reach. Albert Schweitzer agonized but did administer bacteria-killing medication to his ailing human patients. The key in the life-saving approach might just mean assuming a becoming attitude towards life or animality. Perhaps we could come up with a narrative that shows our treatment of C. elegans in a different light. Maybe the training is good for them. In that case, the picture would change. Kind scientists with friendly genetic scissors help animals to perform tasks that bring them food and make their lives good. All this could be seen as half of the solution. We could combine interspecies trade-offs and some kind of reverence, not only to look good, but also to preserve our self-respect as moral agents. So let me conclude by a few observations on proper attitude, sensible trade-offs, safety and precaution. There are three main responses to the question, what is the proper attitude towards C. elegans and BaBots? They are, nah, they are not sentient, whatever. Or, they are life and must not be interfered with unnecessarily. And their sentience should be seriously revered and or respected. The same triad of responses appears when we ask what trade-offs are sensible between BaBots and science. These are, no real trade-offs need to be made here. BaBots are not sentient in any relevant sense and need no ethical attention. Or, no trade-offs are legitimate. BaBots are untouchable. Abort the project immediately. Or, let's keep our heads, but let's keep in mind that they are there too and merit some attention. And then the question of what safety measures should be taken in the name of caution or precaution. And the three responses are the same. Containment is the only measure needed. Worst case scenarios ought to guide action. And safety and sentience should be monitored. We'll keep asking you about the first and continue with the third. But let's round this up by turning the spotlight to ourselves, to you. What do you think, first about the things I have talked about? Are C. elegans or BaBots sentient? If, or insofar as they are, what should be done about it? And then, more widely, what ethical issues, if any, do you see in the project? What ethical issues do you think others could see in the project? And is there something that you want or expect us to do about those issues? With that, I thank you for your attention and stop. Thank you. And now